Welcome back to the Fight Society podcast. I'm your host, Damon Martin. Man, do we have a good show today. We're going to be talking to the champ, light heavyweight champ of the world, Daniel Cormier is going to join us, as well as the man who will face Michael Bisping for the middleweight title coming up at UFC 204 in just a couple of weeks in England, Dan Henderson, the legend Dan Henderson. And we're going to kick things off here in just a few minutes with an interview with the woman who will headline this weekend's UFC Fight Night card from Brasilia, Brazil. Cris Cyborg is going to join us. Cris Cyborg is obviously an interesting topic right now because it was first revealed this week that, not first revealed. We know she's going through a pretty brutal weight cut, and we'll talk about it with our interview with her in a little bit. But Cris is naturally or has naturally fought at 145 pounds her entire career. And this time around, for the second time, she's fighting at 140. As of Monday, she had to cut 25 pounds. She was at 165 as of Monday. When I talked to her today, she was at 160. So she still has about 20 pounds to go, 19 pounds to go, depending on how you want to look at it. And man, that's such a rough weight cut, man. Here's the thing that I don't get about it is I just don't get why. Why are we making her cut? Why is the UFC making her cut to 140 pounds? I don't get that. Are we gaining something by watching her suffer for an extra 5 pounds? Is Lena Landsberg gaining that much of an advantage fighting her 5 pounds down? I mean, I guess she is technically, because if Cris is drained and, half dead walking onto the scale, her opponent clearly is going to have, is that the links we have to go to give Cris Cyborg an even fight? I just don't understand the logic. We're in an era where, safety and security of fighters is paramount. We got so many other issues that, that are going on, PEDs and brain damage and all these different things that fighters deal with on a daily basis or on a fight basis. I just don't think having her cut that extreme amount of weight is really doing anything. I think Here's my thing, and here's why I have such an issue with this also, is that we are now in the era, what I call the Conor McGregor era, the money fight era. We are in the era where titles are great, and they still mean something. They absolutely do mean something. They mean a lot, okay? Championships still mean a lot. But at the end of the day, what sells is what's popular, and what's popular is what sells, and it's not always title fights. It's super fights. Sometimes it's just a fight people really, really want to see. It's not often we have a pay-per-view headliner without a main event that has a title on the line, but we did just have a huge one in August with Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor. Now, understand, Cris Cyborg, as well respected as she is in the MMA community, as far as being, potentially the baddest woman on the planet, she's not as popular or well known as Ronda Rousey. She's popular, absolutely. She's headlining a card, absolutely. But I wouldn't say that she's more popular or more well known than Ronda or probably even Miesha Tate. You could even argue Holly Holm, because of the Ronda Rousey win, that even she's a little more well known. But Cris Cyborg is definitely well known. But we know that Cris Cyborg is a draw. Is my point. She may not be the biggest draw, but she is a draw. And to make her suffer through a weight cut where she's getting down to 140 pounds for no particular reason. I mean, the fight's already not in the division that's happening in the UFC. It's not at 140, 135. We know that. She's never going to cut to 135. It's not going to happen. So I'm just not sure what we're gaining by having her cut that additional 5 pounds. It just doesn't, I don't know. Like, is there some hope that she's going to do it really easily one time and then come back and say, you know what, maybe I can make 135? That's never going to happen. Cris walks around at 170 pounds. She ain't cutting to 135. I mean, it's just not going to happen physically. And as she gets older, fighters talk about this all the time. As they get older, it gets harder and harder for them to cut that weight to get down to whatever weight class they're competing at. And I just don't understand it. Listen, Cris Cyborg is a draw. She's a big enough draw that you could put her at 145. You don't have to introduce a whole division. You don't have to bring in, 30 people, but you could bring in enough challengers to give her fights at 145 until someone from the UFC women's bantamweight division decides they want to make that money and make a super fight. Maybe it's Holly Holm coming back. Maybe Miesha Tate wants to challenge herself. She's talked about that numerous times. Maybe we finally get to see the fight with Ronda Rousey at some point down the road. Amanda Nunes, if I'm not mistaken, she fought at 145 at one point. I'm not saying that's the perfect fight to make, but the point I'm making here is if you're not going to give her weight class, I just don't understand what we're gaining by having her cut to 140 and seeing her suffer and cry and just go through this brutal, just devastating weight cut. We don't do it. I mean, listen, the big thing about the UFC, and they say this all the time, and Dana White has said this numerous times, he never forces anyone to fight it anyway. He'll make a suggestion, and obviously, he's made strong suggestions before for guys like Kelvin Gastelum, or obviously probably what Johnny Hendricks is dealing with right now. And, it almost came to pass with Thiago Alves once upon a time, which is kind of weird that he's cutting all the way to 155 when 170 was a brutal cut for him at one point in his career. But, so they're not telling it. But with Cris, it seems like they're telling her you can fight at 140 or you can't fight. I just don't understand it. Yes, she is a star. Yes, she is a draw. And yes, everyone still wants to see at some point her fight with Ronda Rousey. But I just don't know what we're gaining besides watching Cris go through just a torturous weight cut to get down to 140 when they're not going to introduce a 140-pound division. They're not going to sign fighters specifically to fight at 140 pounds. They signed Lina Landsberg literally just to face Cris Cyborg. I'm not saying that she would have never made it to the UFC on her own merits, but point being is she got signed to fight Cris Cyborg. Now, I understand it's a thinner division. It's a way thin division. I don't disagree with that. Of course it's a thin division, but guess what? There's a lot of divisions that have been thin. Heavyweight has been thin for most. I've been covering MMA for almost 14 years. The heavyweight division traditionally has been a painfully thin division. I remember when I first got into the sport, and I was covering UFC, and I remember going to a fight in Atlantic City between Andrei Arlovsky and Justin Eilers. Now, obviously sad story about Justin Eilers passing away, but at that point, is anyone going to tell me that Justin Eilers was a real, legit number one contender to fight Andrei Arlovsky for the title? Paul Buentella, who I respect the hell out of. I like Paul Buentella very much, but I don't think I would have called him the best of the heavyweights of all time. There was a time when the heavyweight division was painfully thin. There were guys getting title shots at heavyweight that probably didn't deserve it. But that's what you do. You continue to plug forward, and guess what? If you bring in a Cris Cyborg, listen, Ronda Rousey started a division in the UFC. They brought in women basically at that point. And Dana White has said this, that they brought in the division, because Ronda Rousey kind of convinced him it was worthwhile. Now the women's bantamweights are flourishing. Ronda Rousey hasn't been around, but we still had the great Holly Holm Miesha Tate fight. We had the great Miesha Tate Amanda Nunes fight. Yes, Ronda coming back would be the biggest draw still, but that doesn't mean the division will not survive without her. Now, maybe that's not the case with Cris Cyborg. I don't know. Maybe Cris Cyborg decides to retire one day and 145 goes away. I don't know. But there's enough interesting fights out there and enough money on the table that you can still make interesting fights for Cris Cyborg at 145 pounds without making her go through this brutal weight cut each and every time and just watching her suffer. Again, I don't really know what the point is. If you're not going to introduce the weight class anyways, and you're not going to create a 140-pound weight class, then what is the point of making her cut to 140? Have her fight at 145. Yes, there are going to be mismatches. There will be. Guess what? There are mismatches now. A heavyweight, you have guys who are fighting at 220 pounds fighting guys who are 260, okay? That's a 40-pound weight difference. That's much bigger than what you would deal with someone fighting, Cyborg. And trust me, there are fighters who have no business fighting a Cyborg. Jessica Ai, who I love to death, she's a former 125er. She probably shouldn't get in a cage with a Cris Cyborg. She would be massively undersized. But a fighter like Holly Holm, who is actually a very big 135er, I think she could be a legit case of somebody who could challenge a Cris Cyborg if she was truly prepared at 145 pounds. Ronda Rousey fought in the Olympics at 150 some odd pounds. That's what I'm saying is there are fighters out there, there are people out there that can make it an interesting fight for Cris Cyborg that doesn't require her to shed that additional 5 pounds. Go ask Dominic Cruz, who cuts a lot of weight to get down to 135. Go ask him how easy it would be to cut to 130 and just say, cut an extra 5 pounds. You know what I mean? There's a lot of guys out there. Go ask Luke Rockhold, who's a huge middleweight, or Chris Weidman, to say, you know what, can you cut to 180? Could you do that for us? It's not easy. That 5 pounds makes a huge difference, and it's happening to Cris Cyborg, and I just don't get it. Listen, at the end of the day, if you don't want to bring in 145, and you don't want to introduce those fights to the UFC in any way, shape, or form, Ronda's not coming back, let's say, and no one at 135 is willing to go up and face her, then cut ties. Be done with it. Move on. You know what I mean? If Cris is only going to be an Invicta fighter, she's only going to be an Invicta fighter, and that's the end of it. Otherwise, just make the move. Have her fight at 145, bring in fighters who are going to fight her at 145, or find 135ers who are willing to go up and fight her at 145 and create a challenge. Because guess what? One of two things is going to happen. Either Cris Cyborg continues to be one of the biggest stars in the sport in the women's division, and eventually you do build into a super fight with someone like a Ronda Rousey. Or two, one of those fighters, a Holly Holm, a Miesha Tate, one of those other fighters in that division, a Juliana Pena, someone like that comes up and upsets Cyborg, and then you have a new star in your hand. Because right now, Holly Holm beating Ronda is kind of gone a little bit. You know what I mean? Because Holly went out and lost her next 2 fights in a row. So, yes, she'll always be the woman who knocked out Ronda Rousey, but then she went out and lost 2 fights in a row. You kind of lose that luster a little bit. She's still that woman, but we're not putting Holly in that conversation where she should be the number 1 contender. Not for a long while, not for probably 3 or 4 fights at least. But let's say Holly comes back and let's say she knocks out Cris Cyborg. Then she's right back in the conversation. You can't deny that. You say, whoa, this is, okay, she had a bad fight against Valentina Shevchenko, and she lost in the 5th round to Miesha Tate, but she just beat Cris Cyborg. So there's still opportunities to use Cris Cyborg, but if you're not going to use Cris Cyborg, let her go. Let her go somewhere and fight at 145 pounds and be done with it, because what we're doing right now is just torturing her to get down to 140 pounds. I just don't get it. I don't get it. All right, with that said, let's talk to Cris. Obviously, she is in the main event against Lina Landsberg this Saturday night at UFC Fight Night from Brasilia, Brazil. Let's talk to Cris about that fight with Lina Landsberg, her weight cut, and, of course, I got to bring up Ronda Rousey. So let's talk to Cris Cyborg. Hi, Cris. How are you?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
No problem.
So, how is everything? Obviously, fighting back in Brazil, first main event for the UFC. I mean, is there a lot of excitement for this moment?
Yeah, I'm really happy for this opportunity, and I think it'll be great. I'm very thankful for UFC giving me this opportunity to fight again and the main event. I'm really happy.
I was watching your blog this morning, and I'm sure you're probably sick of answering questions about your weight cut, but I am going to ask, how are things going right now?
Getting better. Already lose a little bit, and then always hard. But I believe in my team. I think everything will be all right.
Yeah, I saw Snapchat? Was it you weighed like 160 yesterday or 160 today? Is that right?
Yes.
So is that? I mean, you did it the last time. I know it's a tough cut for you, but I mean, is it any different this time? Is it going better, going worse?
The last time is of course it's worth making 140, but the difference is just because this camp I use birth control, and it just make me have a little bit more.
Yeah, you obviously you're the champion at 145 pounds. I mean, in your own mind, do you feel like that at some point, the UFC should just add that 145-pound division? I think a lot of people want to see you at 145 pounds.
I think I have a lot of fans. I have this opportunity to fight 140. Of course, I really like my division 145. And then they don't have a lot of girls 145 fighting. But, if you check it, 135 top 10, the number 10 should have one winner and 5 lost. And then, have a girls 145. Of course, if you then open the division, the girls have the girls who want to be a fighter, want to be UFC. And then, I think then have a plan, I don't know, then thinking about, but I think it's the opportunity to have 140 now. But, of course, this will be the dream come true.
Yeah. Do you think that, over time, I mean, obviously as your body changes and obviously, as you continue fighting, I mean, I got to imagine 145 is just healthier, too. I mean, let's be honest. That's just a healthier weight cut for you, right?
For being healthy for me, I would like fight 155, because usually I walk on 70. And then, for me, 155 would be perfect, And then, 145, when I start training, and then I just have the division, I don't change my division. All my career I am fighting 11 years. And they just fight this division 145. And, yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask Cris. Going into this fight against Lena Landsberg, a lot of people didn't really know much about her before she got matched up with you. How familiar were you with Lena, and what do you know about her?
I know her last fight. She's fighting my division 145, and I know she's had a lot of fights, kickboxing fight, and she's a strike. And my team study more about her. I really don't study my opponents. I believe in my team, and I train with my team. I think she's strike, and I think it'd be a great fight because I like strike game, and it'd be exciting fight for us fans to watch.
Yeah. Do you look at her as a very dangerous opponent just because, let's be honest, she has nothing to lose? I mean, she's a huge underdog. People don't know her like we know you. I mean, do you feel like that always makes her a dangerous opponent because she has nothing to lose in this fight?
I think all my opponents for me is danger. When the girls step in tackle for me, I think then have something special when they want fight. And then I expect all the girls to step there. But I don't put the responsibility in my head. I train really hard, and I'm ready for 5 rounds. And I go over there and do my best. And always in the victory, I give it in God's hands. I just go over there and do my job. And I think she's all about. I don't think she's a think don't worry about. I think she's all about. Man, I don't think nobody go fight me if they doesn't think about. And then I will do my best for that, and I think it'll be a great fight.
Yeah. Do you obviously you respect Lena Landsberg for stepping up and accepting this, but what do you say to some of the other fighters who won't fight you, who have turned down fights with you? I know Holly Holm had an opportunity to fight you and she turned it down back in May. I'm sure other fighters have done it. I mean, where is your head at when you hear that fighters are turning down fights with you?
In the beginning for me. This is something personal. I think some people don't like challenge too much. If a lot of things happen in my career, and then I'm here now, 5-140 main event UFC. I like challenging myself, but something you cannot change. Every person is different, and I always forget the answer. But I think every person is different. And you can ask me again because I don't have good answers.
Just opponents, turning down fights with you. I mean, obviously, you respect Lena Landsberg for taking the fight. But...
Yeah, but for me, when I see this, when I hear this, she don't want to fight you. For me, it's new because I'm coming from shooter box, and shooter box I learned something: you never choose opponent. And then when you start training, when you fight in the beginning of your career in the shooter box, you don't know who you fight. In the YouTube, you cannot go check in your profile and you see the fight your opponent. You need to be ready for any situation before. If you see all the old guys compete, if you see people, you fight somebody, man, you cannot go YouTube and check all the fights, because you don't have it. Just he's have a couple of fights, you cannot see. And then this is for me new because in UFC, in shooter box, we always be learning. We have to be ready for any situation. You will never have to choose opponent. And this I learned from my gym. And this is this I bring in my heart. But you need to be challenge yourself too.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when I talked to you before your fight in May, Cris, you had mentioned, some of the super fights you would like to have in the UFC. And I know Dana White had said this week that, he still has a lot of interest in eventually seeing you fight Ronda Rousey. You've heard her name so long, for so many years. Do you still have interest in fighting Ronda Rousey?
If this fight never happened because she don't want to make before, because she don't want to make this fight happen. And then the UFC don't make this fight happen because, man, this is a long time, Maybe she's one time, for training and focus for fight. Me, it'll be, I'm never choose my opponent. And, who would put me, on 40, I will fight. I will fight her, of course, but 140, 145. I'm not going 135 either for fight her because, man, I world champ too, and she's not a champ anymore. And I'm a world champ, but I go down fight the girl super fight. You can go up a little bit and fight and make super fight for all the fans. Not just about belt. This is something, a tournament for all the fans who watch super fight for MMA.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like, in your head, I mean, do you feel like there will be something missing if you never get to fight Ronda, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter because everybody knows that this fight don't happen because me. I have my mind clean about this. I've not stopped training. I'm not losing fight. Stay 1 year out. I keep training. I keep training, keep fighting. I don't stop and come back and stop and I'm here. I'm here. If I have my number, just call me and say, when the next fight.
I know, for your last fight in May, you had a little bit more time to prepare. I know, going through the weight cut and everything this time is a little tougher. After this fight, and I don't want to look past Lina Landsberg, but after this fight, I mean, how quickly would you want to fight again? Would it be easier, for you to fight at 140 again if maybe they booked you for December or something sooner? Or, where is your head at after this fight?
No way. December, no way. I need break. I want to enjoy my family, vacation, and eat. I work like 2 years straight. Ever 4 months, 5 months, ever. Like 3 years. And then I need to really break it, and then I really motivate. If I tell you now, okay, I have a vacation break, man. Next day I'm running vacation. This is because I really enjoy training, but sometimes you have to have a little break. But for sure, you break, keep training. Half. Just fun.
Well, Cris, thank you so much for the time. Best of luck this weekend. I look forward to seeing you in your first UFC main event, and I appreciate you taking the time for me.
Okay, no problem. Thanks so much.
All right. Bye-bye. The Fight Society podcast is sponsored by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Rocket Mortgage brings the mortgage approval process into the 21st century. Fast, powerful, and completely online, it has taken out all the complicated, time-consuming parts of applying for a mortgage out of the equation. Hate searching through stacks of old files and paperwork? With Rocket Mortgage, you can easily share your bank statements and pay stubs at the touch of a button, helping you get approved in minutes for a custom mortgage solution that's been tailored to your unique financial situation. Even better, with Rocket Mortgage, you can do all of this on your phone or tablet. It's quick, online process that you can manage from the convenience of your couch. If you're looking to refinance your mortgage or buy a home, check out Rocket Mortgage today at quickenloans.com/MMA. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLSconsumeraccess.org, number 3030. As Cris Cyborg makes her second appearance in the UFC, I mean, obviously, not to continue to harp on the subject about her weight cut, but assuming she does get through the weight cut this weekend, which is an if, there's not a for sure kind of thing, but if she gets through that weight cut this weekend, it's going to be awfully hard to see her doing anything other than knocking out Lina Landsberg probably early in the fight. I had a chance to talk to Lina Landsberg last week, and, she has a great attitude, seems like a really strong fighter, seems like a confident fighter. Obviously, she comes from a Muay Thai background. She had a kickboxing match with Valentina Shevchenko once upon a time, so she does come from that same background, but ultimately, I just don't see this fight playing out any differently than what we saw with Cris Cyborg and Leslie Smith, or what we've seen out of Cris Cyborg's last, 10 opponents, is that she just overwhelms them and eventually, swarms them with strikes. I would say this fight doesn't make it past the first round, maybe the second round. I just feel like it's going to be another spectacular finish for Cris Cyborg. And listen, it's a showcase for her. She's in Brazil, and, listen, I know a lot of fight fans hate when people like me compare fighting or mixed martial arts to the WWE or to professional wrestling, but this is what you call a squash match. This is one of those old school matches where you get some no-name guy to step in there and face a, kind of a new monster you're trying to promote, and you make them look beastly by beating up on the lesser person. Now, I think Lina Landsberg, from what I've seen out of her, is she's a pretty solid fighter, and I think she could have an interesting career in the UFC, but I just don't see her having a great fight against Cris Cyborg. I mean, listen, this is the number one, in my opinion, the number one pound for pound woman in the world, and that's a dangerous prospect for anyone to face, much less a 6-1 fighter making her UFC debut. So I like Cris Cyborg to win this fight pretty dominantly. Don't forget, this weekend we also have Renan Barão making his second appearance at featherweight against Felipe Nover. Again, Renan Barão, he didn't have a bad performance against Jeremy Stephens in his first fight at featherweight. I think he's just finding out kind of how the other half lives now that he's not the bigger, stronger, more physically imposing fighter, even though he had to cut a lot of weight to get down to bantamweight. he's kind of finding out that featherweights are big, and these guys, a lot of these guys cut from 155, and obviously that's a lot bigger than Hayden Barral. So I think this is, again, not a squash match because Felipe Nover's a tough dude. He's got good Muay Thai. He's got a solid ground game. He's been around. He's a veteran. But I do think this is a fight that Hayden Barral definitely can and will win. You also have a very important heavyweight matchup, kind of 3 down the line, as Roy Nelson takes on Antonio Bigfoot Silva. Antonio Silva, from what I had heard, the sources I talked to, that basically said that Joe Silva, UFC matchmaker, was going to cut him. It was done. It was done. He was going to get cut. And I guess he had a conversation with his manager and Bigfoot, or maybe it was just Bigfoot, but from what I've been told, from what I've heard, is they basically convinced the UFC to give him one more shot. He's getting that this weekend against Roy Nelson, and it's not an easy fight because we know what kind of power Roy Nelson has. Now, on the flip side, Roy Nelson has been struggling a little bit. I mean, obviously, his record has not been great. He had a, kind of a up-and-down performance against Derek Lewis, although I thought he won that fight. Was an ugly fight. I don't know that anyone's really going to look back at that fight and find a lot of highlights, but I thought Roy Nelson deserved the win in that one. But Roy did get cracked a couple of times, and he got rattled, and that's something that never used to happen with Roy. I mean, I remember watching Roy take shots from Stipe Miocic that I was sure would have knocked out any other heavyweight on the roster, and he took them and kept coming. Roy Nelson is notorious for that, but. Listen, I've always said this, and if you listen to any of my podcasts, you read any of my articles, you've heard anything I've said over the past, decade, I've always said telling a guy or complimenting a fighter by saying they have a good chin is almost a great way of saying you know how to take a punch, which means you're getting punched. And to me, I think defense in MMA is better served if you avoid that damage, if you've got good head movement, good footwork, and you're able to avoid those shots rather than take them. Yes, having a chin is good. In case you do get cracked, you want to be able to absorb that punishment and come back with some of your own. But having that invincible chin, guys like Cabbage Correa, there's all kinds of guys throughout history, Mark Hunt, there's all kinds of guys throughout history who've had these impenetrable chins, and eventually somebody finds a hole, somebody finds a way to tag you and put you away. Mark Hunt did it to Roy Nelson. Fabricio Verdum did it to Mark Hunt. Listen, it's all reciprocal here, but my point is Roy Nelson, I think he wins this weekend because I think he packs a bigger punch, and I don't think Antonio Silva has ever really taken a great punch outside of his one fight against Mark Hunt, which was ridiculous. I don't think anyone would have predicted it would have gone that way. But outside of that, Antonio Silva has never been a guy who has taken punishment very well. He tends to get knocked out in those situations. So I think Roy Nelson wins this weekend. But I'm not sure that Roy Nelson, I'm just a little concerned because his last couple of fights he's gotten tagged and it's kind of hurt him a little bit more. Now, there's no shame in getting tagged by a monster like Derek Lewis and going down. There's no shame in that by any means. There's no shame in getting tagged in any of the number of heavyweight fights. But I don't think Roy can depend on that as much these days. I don't know that he'll have to really worry about that with Bigfoot Silva. But if he wins this fight and then gets matched up with another top 10 heavyweight again to kind of jump back in the thick of that division, he may have to worry about that. So it's just something to keep an eye on as this fight moves forward. The rest of the card, pretty solid. You got Francisco Trinaldo against Paul Felder. That's a fun fight. I think that may be the toughest fight on the entire card to pick. Very, very even fight there. Francisco Trinaldo, extremely underrated. Doesn't get hardly anybody talking about him, but he does have quite a few wins in a row. Very, very tough guy. Thiago Santos, who who was a really solid prospect, beat Elias Theodoro, had some other big knockouts, beat Nate Marquardt. Found out that Gegard Mousasi is a different kind of animal because Gegard kind of picked him apart and finished him at UFC 200. Now he comes back against Eric Spicely, and if you're looking for my what I would call a guaranteed pick on this card, that's my guaranteed pick on this card. Thiago Santos, Eric Spicely is not a bad prospect, but he's a grappler, and I don't like his chances against someone as heavy-handed and nasty as Thiago Santos. I think this is going to be a pretty brutal knockout if I'm making a prediction. On the undercard, I really, really like that fight between Gilbert Burns and Michel Prazeres. I really like that fight. Michel Prazeres has gotten a lot of wins, 20-2 record, very impressive. Gilbert Burns may be one of the best grapplers we have in the sport. I really like that fight as well. So there's some fun fights on this card. The prelims start on FS1, 8 p.m. on Saturday night. Main card at 10 p.m., capped off by Cris Cyborg and Lena Landsberg. All right now, let's get into our next guest. Our next guest is a man who will challenge Michael Bisping for the UFC middleweight title at UFC 204, the legend Dan Henderson. Dan is getting this title shot, and he knows that this is his last fight. This is it. Dan is retiring afterwards, and I know there have been some rumors about whether or not Dan will actually retire when this is all said and done. But I asked Dan that very question to kind of pin him down on an answer, because a lot of people have questioned that. If Dan knocks out Michael Bisping again, what are the chances that he doesn't actually retire? So we're going to talk to Dan about that, the rematch, obviously coming down to this moment, getting the title shot, getting the shot ahead of guys like, Chris Weidman, Luke Rockhold, Jacare Souza. We're going to talk about all of that right now. So let's talk to the legend, Dan Henderson.
How's it going?
I'm good. I appreciate taking time to chat with me as always.
Oh, no problem at all.
So how's everything, man? Obviously, title fight is creeping up. It's only a few weeks away. I looked at the calendar, and that's what I texted you. I was like, wow, this fight's coming up just around the corner already.
Yeah, it always happens that way. Comes pretty quick.
I know we talked after the last fight, and obviously, your decision to basically say if you got the Bisping fight, you would retire after that. Kind of walk me through that whole thing. When the UFC finally came calling and said, "Hey, we're going to give you this shot." Like, what was your reaction?
Well, obviously, I was, pretty happy to have that opportunity. It was an unexpected opportunity, but still happy to get it and want to make the most of it. So just been, training hard during training camp here.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you had said that, this is, that you would be fine with fighting Bisping, winning the title, and then retiring. But there's a lot of people who just don't think you could be able to give it up after winning the title. How is your mind now that you sit just a few weeks out from the fight?
Pretty much the same. I'm pretty set on, that being my last fight.
Yeah. Do you feel like, I don't know, you've had so many accomplishments in your career. Pride champion, you won the UFC early in your career, but, obviously the Pride Championship, Strikeforce Championship. Do you feel like the UFC title, that would be the perfect way to cap things off?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something that has been a goal of mine, and I feel like I've been close to having that opportunity again, and should have had that opportunity against John Jones and got hurt and just had a rough road back after the injury. So I'm pretty thankful to be in this position to where the fans asked for this fight and Dana White obliged.
Yeah. Was there ever a moment, after you had, a couple losses or as you kind of move forward, was there a moment where you kind of thought to yourself that, UFC title wasn't going to happen? And then obviously it did happen, but was there ever a moment when you kind of said, I'm probably not going to get a title shot at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. I was okay with that. I'm completely content with what I've done in my career and satisfied with that. But, obviously knew I fell short of my goals, but, that happens, and it's not something that I'll beat myself up over. But, I'm just fortunate enough to have this last chance opportunity.
Yeah. You have a lot of history with Michael Bisping, going back to The Ultimate Fighter. You guys had a pretty serious rivalry leading into that. Was it, what were your thoughts when you heard Bisping, calling you out, saying that was the one fight he wanted, that was the one thing he wanted to rectify? How excited were you to know, when you see him win the title, that was unexpected, but then, the one fight he wanted was you. That was the blemish on his record he wanted to erase. I don't know, was it excitement? Was it like, oh, finally, this is going to happen? Because I know when I talked to you previously, you didn't seem to have a ton of interest in rematching Bisping because, listen, let's be honest, it's not going to be easy to top what you did the last time.
Yeah, and pretty much that was my attitude about it. I wouldn't be able to do it much better than I did the first time, and he didn't have anything else to offer me. So now he does. So, yeah, I was pretty happy to hear that that's the fight he wanted, and especially knowing that the fans wanted it. I think that's why Dana White said, all right, we'll make it happen.
Yeah. You've had a lot of knockouts in your career, and I've been at a lot of them. I remember sitting cage side for the Fedor fight, which was one of the most ridiculous fights I've ever seen, one of the most amazing knockouts of all time. But would you say throughout your entire career, the most satisfying knockout has been the knockout over Michael Bisping? Would that still rank number one?
It's hard to say. It's right up there. Satisfying in a way that, I made him eat his words type of satisfying, but at the time, he hadn't accomplished much compared to other fighters that I've fought and knocked out in the sport. So, those would be much more satisfying as far as feeling like I accomplished something bigger.
Yeah. You had to go through 6 weeks of spending time with Bisping when you guys filmed The Ultimate Fighter. You guys did the press conference a few weeks ago in Vegas, which I was at. Listen, I know fighters talking trash has never really bothered you. It's never really been your thing to, let guys get under your skin. But, how was that, dealing with Bisping again, knowing that you're going to deal with his mouth, knowing that you're going to deal with the attitude? Were you just kind of expecting that? Is that just kind of par for the course when you fight a guy like that?
Yeah, it doesn't bother me at all. Actually, I was expecting more from him, and I think he started out strong and then checked himself and reined it back a little bit, but whatever. Or maybe the Irish fans kind of checked him on it. I don't know.
You seem to be having a good time. You always had a smile on your face. It doesn't seem like anything he was saying or ever has said to you really ever got to you.
No, it usually doesn't. I'm not. I don't take things personal, and I know what I'm capable of doing, and I know that. Yeah, when the day comes, I'll have that opportunity to make that happen, and that's what I look forward to.
Yeah. What were your thoughts, Dan? This fight coming about, I'm quite sure you would have accepted it no matter how it happened or whatever, but what were your thoughts on going to England to fight Bisping? Because I know stepping into a guy's backyard is not easy. Listen, we got to be honest. Judging, that kind of stuff has to come into play. What were your thoughts when they said we want this to happen in England?
Well, obviously it's not ideal, but I can't be picky when they're offering me a title shot, and not being ranked high enough to really necessarily deserve that title shot. I'll do it wherever the hell they want.
What did you think? This is out of your control. Like I said, it's kind of like, I guess, maybe, not, when they come calling with an offer, you're never going to say no because, I'm not ranked number one. But what did you think about the blowback you heard from maybe Chris Weidman or Luke Rockhold, guys that felt like or Jacare Souza, felt like they deserved the title shot ahead of you? Did you understand that? Did you have to say, listen, this is the business we're in. This is a big fight.
I completely understood where they're coming from, and if I was in their shoes, I'm sure I'd have, similar feelings, but, it's hard to say. This is kind of not a normal situation. I'm the guy that's been around a long time and has done quite a bit in the sport and has beat him up worse than he's ever been beat up before, so... I think that, and the fans wanted to see it again. And for me, I don't feel so bad because, I'm kind of cutting in line a little bit, but at the same time, I'm going to cut right back out of line, and they can pick them up where I leave them. They can have what's left of Bisping after I'm done with them.
I love it. Let me ask you, Dan, you have seen, obviously it's been quite a few years since you fought Bisping. Obviously, you've always been at the top of your game. Yes, you've suffered through some tough losses, and Bisping suffered through some tough wins and losses. But do you feel like you're facing a much different Michael Bisping now than the guy you fought before? Or stylistically, is he still very much the same guy?
He's definitely similar to how he was before, and he's built upon that with adding more stuff to his game. He kicks a little bit more, and depending on who he fights him a little bit differently, which is a normal thing for any fighter. But I still feel like I'm better than him everywhere. You know, I'm more dangerous than him on the ground, in the wrestling, and striking. You know, and so I just have been really focusing on my conditioning, making sure that I'm able to perform for 5 rounds, and you know that's the toughest part about this, and he's always in shape for his fights, so you know I'm really focused on that.
Yeah, we've known, you know, from the day you set back into the UFC that, you know, you always have the equalizer. You have the H-bomb, as they call it. You have the big right hand. You know, you have the knockout power. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, if you get into that exchange with Bisping, just like you did in the first fight, I mean, is that ultimately going to be, you know, listen, you could win a 5-round decision. You could win by submission. There's a lot of different ways you could win. But do you feel like ultimately Bisping still can't take your best punch?
Well, I mean, it's all about where you can land that best punch, and if I land that punch on anybody in the right spot, it doesn't matter who you are, yeah, I'm going to knock you out. But you know, that's the game. That's the tough part is landing it where you need to land that punch, and setting it up right, and you know, and then following through if you know you don't knock them out completely. So yeah, I think that's always there, but it's never something I'm relying on. I'm planning on winning every round and just staying in his face and beating him up the whole fight, and not planning on knocking him out, hoping for it, but not planning on it.
Yeah. You know, there's going to be pressure in every fight. I mean, there was going to be pressure when you fought John Jones. There was pressure going into the Hector Lombard fight. I mean, there's pressure going into every single fight you have during your career. But knowing that this is it, knowing that you've set this up to be a title fight, this is your last fight, you're going to retire afterwards. I mean, does that change anything going into a fight like this for you, Dan? Just knowing that's all, you know, that's all there for you? Or is it exciting? I mean, knowing that the anticipation that, you know, this is a chance, you finally get your UFC title shot, and, you know, this is it. You get to put everything on the line in this fight, and that's it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's no more added pressure. It's more excitement than anything. More excitement that I don't have to go through another training camp. This part, but you know, also, you know, I know that I'm going to miss the competition. The fights are the fun part. The training camp is the tough part, and you know, I enjoy fighting, so I'm going to miss that. But at the same time, I'm excited, you know, about moving forward and being able to start making plans farther in advance, other than when I schedule a fight.
Yeah. How does your family feel about that? About you, you know, after that fight in October, that they're going to have, you know, their husband, they're going to have dad, they're going to have everybody around. I mean, how's the family feel about that?
You know, they have mixed feelings also. You know, they pretty much, that's all they've ever known is me being a fighter. I was fighting before they were born, and you know, I'm still doing it. So that's all they've ever known. And my oldest is 17. So, you know, I think they're okay with it. They're not going to make it over to England, unfortunately, but you know, the kids won't, and a little bit bummed about that. But you know, with school and everything, it makes it a little tough.
Yeah. This is a tough question to ask you, Dan, because you have accomplished so much. You know, when you I mean, listen, you could have never won a UFC title, and you would go down as one of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time. And you held 2 Pride titles at once. You beat Fedor. I mean, just the laundry list. I can sit here and list them all day. You don't need to hear it. You know what they are. But beating Michael Bisping, winning the UFC title in your final fight, I mean, what do you kind of feel like this is the perfect cap to the career, the maybe the biggest moment of your career right now? I don't know. I mean, you tell me, because I'm sure if you would have beaten John Jones a few years ago, that would have been awesome as well. But do you feel like the way this is all playing out, this really does feel like, you know, the biggest moment of your career?
Absolutely. You know, it's a huge opportunity for me to be able to finish my career on top, and you know, like I said, I'm not going to waste that opportunity, and you know, do things half-assed. I'm going to make sure that I'm in shape. I'm going to make sure that, my game plan is set. And it definitely is a huge fight. But at the same time, I'm not adding any extra pressure to myself. I feel like it's, it's a fight that I'm going to go out there and try and beat the guy up just like any other fight that I do.
Yeah. You know you're ready for 5 rounds, but you've been in there with Bisping before. You've obviously, he's tested you a little bit. I mean, it wasn't a 30-second knockout. It went in the second round, so it's not like you didn't feel a little bit of what he had to offer. But at the end of the day, you're ready for 5 rounds, but do you feel like the rematch will likely end at least similar to the first fight? And meaning, do you believe you'll knock Bisping out again?
Well, I think there's a high possibility of that for sure. It all depends on, obviously there's a lot that depends on, but I feel like there's a good possibility that I'll knock him out again. I just need to make sure that if I don't, I'm still winning the rounds.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, when this whole thing came up, I was excited. I think the fans were excited. I think this is one of those matches that just supersedes the sport. This is a rematch that made all the sense in the world with you coming off your win, Bisping winning the title. I don't know if you believe in that whole everything happens for a reason. I don't know that I necessarily believe in that, but it felt like this was just destiny. It felt like this is the perfect fight to happen at this time. I don't know how you feel about it, but that's the way I think it played out.
Well, definitely a lot of stars had to have lined for this fight to even be able to be considered, and they aligned just perfect, and it's happening. So I'm very thankful for that, and looking forward to being in Manchester and getting that title.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Well, Dan, it's always a pleasure. I always appreciate taking the time. Obviously, safe travels to England, and let's talk after the fight, man. Like I said, we got a lot to recap afterwards.
Okay, absolutely. I appreciate it.
All right, talk to you soon, buddy.
Well, thank you. Bye-bye.
Hey, it's Damon here from the Fight Society podcast. I got to tell you guys, I went to the store the other day to buy some razors. Now, I have a beard, and I don't shave that often, but every day, every other day, I have to get rid of the neck beard. Not a fan. Or a fan of the beard that kind of grows up a little too high on your face, make you look a little bit too much like a wolf man. So I do shave pretty regularly. And I went to the store the other day to buy some razors, and I kind of forgot how expensive razors are. Ridiculous, right? You get like 3 or 4 razors, and it's like $20. It's ridiculous. You have to take out like a small loan to afford razors every month. And that's why I teamed up with DollarShaveClub.com. I mean, they have incredible deals and a plan that really fits you. You don't have to get, 1 razor, 2 razors. You can have a range of different plans to check out. Amazing blades. And that way you're not shaving on a rusty blade and it feels like you're going to rip the neck hair out from your neck or the hair from your beard out of your face. It's great. You get a new razor every month. You sign up. And I don't have to deal with the hassle and the pain in the butt of going to the drugstore or the store or, selling a kidney to be able to afford razor blades. Now, it sounds crazy, I know. You don't think about the cost of razor blades, if you shave every day or every other day. But I'm telling you right now, DollarShaveClub.com is the way to go. I got these products just recently, and I started using them, and they are pretty amazing. You can get a kit that has the executive blade, which is what I use. They have a shave butter you can use, which is actually way better, at least in my opinion, than any shave cream I've used recently. Shave creams, you get the stuff from the store, pay a couple bucks for it, and you get the nicks, you get the cuts, the scrapes, things like that. This stuff is fantastic. It's amazing. And I'm telling you right now, DollarShaveClub.com is the way to go. So here's your chance to see why over 3 million members like me love Dollar Shave Club. Dollar Shave Club is so confident in the quality of all their products, now you can get your first month of the club for free. Just pay shipping. That's it. And that's far less than you're going to pay for any razor blades in a store. After that, it's just a few bucks a month. No long-term commitment. No hidden fees. There's no reason not to do it. Get yours at DollarShaveClub.com/fight. That's DollarShaveClub.com/fight. A lot of people forget when you talk about Dan Henderson's legendary career that his career really started as a wrestler. He was an Olympic level wrestler before he ever transitioned to mixed martial arts. He was part of that Team Quest team that had Matt Lindland, who was an Olympic silver medalist, and Randy Couture, who was an Olympic alternate, and you had obviously Dan Henderson, who's a legend in Greco-Roman wrestling. So he was starting out as a wrestler, and we've seen throughout history, that wrestling has been considered one of the best pedigrees for mixed martial arts. I mean, again, I don't need to sit here and name the resume of wrestlers who have done well in this sport, but when you look at the guys who are doing well in this sport right now, Stipe Miocic comes from a wrestling background, Cain Velasquez, wrestling background, Daniel Cormier, wrestling background, John Jones, wrestling background, Chris Weidman, wrestling background. Now, of course, there are exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, Tyron Woodley, wrestling background. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there that are doing well in the UFC right now who have come from wrestling backgrounds. It's the best leg up on the competition day one in MMA. I think it's far better than kickboxing, and I think it's far better than jiu-jitsu. If you're looking for a base for mixed martial arts, the hardest art of mixed martial arts to learn is wrestling, okay? Because most wrestlers who have been doing it since they were 5 or 6 or 7 years old. They didn't start that late. Now, not impossible to pick it up. Georges St-Pierre did it. My point is, coming back around to all this, was our guest last week, Kyle Snyder, 2016 Olympic gold medalist, 2015 world champion, 20 years old. And I don't think he'll make his transition to MMA. You know, he said he wants to do it immediately, and what I take that as is he immediately wants to start learning some things. But Kyle is a student of the game, and he wants to know how to do it so when he finally does make that transition in, let's say, 3 years, maybe it's 4 years, that he knows what he's doing. And at that point, he'd be 24, 25 years old. I mean, MMA should fall down on their knees and thank the stars that a guy like Kyle Snyder is even considering MMA. I'm hoping Dana White and Sean Shelby, Joe Silva, whoever it is, have already made those calls and said, we want to sign you the minute you're ready. We'll sign you. You don't have to fight for 4 years. You know what I mean? Now, right now, obviously, he's still got eligibility left at Ohio State. Obviously, if he takes money, things like that, he wouldn't be able to compete at Ohio State. He still has eligibility left there. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work out for him, if he's going to end up taking the money and just training, or if he wants to wrestle at Ohio State for another year or two. But the point being, the UFC should invest in this kid right away. And a guy who knows that all too well is a guy who is a former 2-time Olympian, our current light heavyweight champion, Daniel Cormier. And Daniel spoke about Kyle Snyder on UFC Tonight last week when I broke the story that Kyle was going to be looking to make that transition into mixed martial arts. Now we're going to talk to Daniel Cormier about the prospects of what Kyle Snyder brings to the sport, because he is a blue chip prospect. We're also going to talk to DC about his upcoming fights, what's going on with the Rumble Johnson fight, what's going on with him fighting in December, what's going on with John Jones. So let's talk right now to the champ, DC, Daniel Cormier.
What's up, Damon?
Did you get all recovered, all napped out?
Man, I was tired, man. 5 o'clock, I had to get up this morning. It was terrible.
That's rough, man. That's rough. I know those 5 a.m. flights when I fly to Vegas, man. It's not a fun day.
No, I didn't fly to Vegas. It was actually L.A.
Yeah, either way, it ain't fun getting up 5 a.m.
No, man, it was terrible.
So how's everything?
Terrible.
How's everything else, man? Saw you holding things down at UFC. How, not awkward, but how weird is it interviewing Cain Velasquez? Be honest.
Interviewing is not very bad, actually, because I think it lets him be a little more loose and a little more open. It allows him to just kind of be more of himself. So I think it works for both of us, because it's like we're just talking. I'm asking him questions. Same type of things that we talk about in the when we're at home, like, man, a little bit different verbiage, it's like instead of going, it's okay, I'll be like, hey, so who do you want to fight next? The sentences are formed a little differently, but we're still getting the same point across.
Yeah, it was good stuff. I enjoyed that interview. I know Cain. I've talked to Cain many times. Cain can be a little tough on the interviews. I know he's not a big media guy, but you got some good stuff out of him. So I was impressed.
Yeah. And again, that comes with the comfort level. I try to tell my guys, at the gym, I go, use our platform. We've got a big platform to say what we need to say. So if you have something big, like Cain saying he'd fight Verdum or won a title fight, this is the perfect platform. You have a teammate that hosts a weekly show every week. They get out there and say it, because it's everywhere. It gets picked up everywhere if you go on that show and actually say it.
Yeah, if you see the headlines, every website in the world is running a story on Cain Velasquez today.
Exactly. So it actually serves its purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I talk to you about a lot of other stuff, DC, let me get right into one of the reasons I wanted to get you on today is I want to talk to you about Kyle Snyder. Now, I know you addressed it on the show a little bit last night. I talked to Kyle on Monday. I broke the story. He was talking about it, said he wants to, fight in the UFC and win the Olympics simultaneously. Now, he did say, he's going to take a couple years. He's not just going to jump in and take a fight right away. But I know you're a wrestling guy. You're an MMA guy. I mean, how exciting is it for a guy like Kyle Snyder to say he wants to fight?
It's exciting. For me, the MMA fan, it's very exciting. For me, the wrestling fan, it's scary because we can't lose guys like Kyle Snyder. Those are the guys that will maintain the U.S.'s wrestling around the world. We can't have our best guys like that going to MMA early. But Kyle wants to do both. But, I spoke to him, and he said, he's going to start doing a little bit of boxing and stuff, but he's not really looking to fight anytime soon. He still has 2 years eligibility at Ohio State, which I know you don't want him to lose. So he can't start competing professionally and still be wrestling for Ohio State, I don't think. I can't say that 100% certainty, but I think he can't do much in terms of an MMA career because he'd have to do everything on his own. Can't have any agent, can't have a manager. And for a guy like that, you need all that to get your contracts in order because everything's going to be so big for him as soon as he starts. So we got to kind of pump our brakes a little bit. But he said he'll start to box and do a little bit of stand-up training. But this is a blue-chip prospect. I mean, this is as blue as a blue-chip prospect gets in any sport.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even if he waited 4 years, let's say he just dedicates himself to wrestling, goes to do the Ohio State thing, goes and wins another world championship, wins the Olympics again. He comes out, he's 25. He's 25.
Hey, that's what I said last night. You could have a guy, if he is able to do something that is damn near impossible, because you saw Jordan Burroughs, a guy that was just so dominant around the world, wasn't able to complete 6 in a row, so it gives you more respect for what John did, if you have to find a way to respect John Smith anymore. But if Kyle can do that and win 6 in a row, and still only be 25 years old starting his MMA career, I mean, that's legendary. That is legendary. He's got all the time in the world, So, I'm more Daniel, the wrestling guy that's saying, stay and wrestle, man. This MMA stuff, you got plenty of time for that.
Yeah. Here's my curiosity, DC. I know you said, openly that, you're not going to fight forever. You know what I mean? You're not going to fight for 8 more years or anything. So I'm curious. Let's say Kyle Snyder, 4 years from now, he wraps up his wrestling career, wins another gold medal, wins maybe, a couple more national championships, whatever the case may be. He's ready to transition. Would you like to see him come out and join you at AKA?
Oh, we would be at the front of the line. But we won't be alone. Everybody will be standing there waiting and hoping that Kyle Snyder joins their team. But I think that in terms of making a case for a wrestler, pure wrestler, high-level wrestler, to become successful in this sport, we have a background for it, better than anyone else. I'll go down the line, starting from Fitch and Koscheck to Velasquez and myself and we've had a number of guys that have reached the highest levels as just wrestlers, and we turned them into efficient strikers and turned them into complete mixed martial artists. So I think, we will be at the head of the line hoping to get a visit from Kyle Snyder.
Yeah, I love it. I think it'd be a great camp, and I think it'd be kind of fun. John Smith, to you, and then obviously you teaching the next generation MMA champions. Because I think Kyle Snyder, if he can box at all, this guy has got all the makings of being a future champion.
Oh, he's such a grinder. He's so tough. He's so mentally tough. He's so skilled. So he doesn't need much in terms of the striking aspect. He needs to learn to grapple, learn to defend submissions, and just learn to strike enough to where his hands become dangerous. If he has any power in his hands, with his takedown threat, he'll be knocking guys out left and right because they'll be so worried about the takedown that they'll forget a little bit about their strike defense.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it all develops. Like I said, look at what you did. I mean, you came in, as a wrestler, and you developed into a knockout striker, and now you're a complete mixed martial artist and the best light heavyweight in the world. So, I mean, that's the kind of skill that kid has.
100%. With a higher pedigree, and even better pedigree than I had.
Yeah.
And age on his side. I was 30 when I started.
Yeah.
Kid, even if he waits 4 years, he's only going to be 25 years old.
Yeah. Crazy. DC, let me ask you real quick, man. What's going on with you, man? I've been waiting to hear news on a fight announcement. We got all this craziness going on with Anthony Johnson, and I don't and John Jones. I'm so lost in this whole thing. So what exactly is going on?
I have no idea. That's the thing, man. I don't really know. I don't really know. You know, I would obviously fight Anthony Johnson if that was presented to me, but it hasn't been. You know, I don't know what's happening with John Jones, man, to be honest with you. You know, a few weeks ago it ramped up that he maybe didn't take what people thought he took. I saw a few weeks ago that said his max suspension with USADA was a year now only. Him and Brock both, their suspensions have been reduced to long as it could be as a year. So there were a lot of moving parts, but I don't even know what's going on. It just kind of all went cold. You know, it was like everything was like hot, and it just kind of went cold. So I guess we have to see what's happening with this dude.
Yeah. Does it make any sense to you? Because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to have John fight Anthony Johnson. Because my idea was you fight Anthony Johnson because he's the number one contender. You're the champion. Have John Jones fight Alexander Gustafsson. That was my idea. Have him fight Alex again.
Or he could. You know, that could work too if we all fight on the same night. Now, look, there's a couple different. We could all fight on the same night, and that would be fine. And then the winners fight the winners, you know, and if you need to make another fight, then the losers can fight. It doesn't matter, you know, but there's a, you know, it's a top-heavy division. I've got to be honest with you. You see by John beat all of us, and then me and Anthony beat Alex. I beat Anthony. Alex can beat everybody else. It's like a very top-heavy division right now. So I think the best thing we can do is just all sign up to fight each other. Let's just do it, you know?
Yeah. I know that, you know, when you dealt with everything that happened at UFC 200 and the emotion about that, and we talked about it afterwards, you go out there, you still get a win over an Anderson Silva. I mean, were you hoping to get another fight in this year? I kind of imagined you would.
I mean, I want to fight towards the end of the year. Obviously, I would like to fight. You know, I usually would fight a lot. Like, I fought 3 times in 13, 3 times in 14, 3 times in 15, and then only once this year, you know. So this has been a slow year for me, but I got so much stuff outside of the octagon, man, that I try to do that whenever I don't have a fight, I try to take care of all these other things. You know, I have 2 barbershops. I got down in Southern California, my wrestling kids program, you know, outside of my children and my TV career, you know, so I'm super busy whether I'm fighting or not. So when I'm fighting, you know, everything else kind of has to take a back seat. So I love the competition, you know, but when there's not a fight, I just keep myself busy with other things.
Yeah. I know you said something interesting on UFC Tonight last night, and I enjoyed it. You said, you know, John Jones talking about, you know, fighting Stipe would be the challenge of a lifetime. And you said if anyone at light heavyweight should go up and challenge for the heavyweight title, it's Daniel Cormier. Now, I know you're not calling out Stipe Miocic because I know, you know, that wasn't what you're doing. I know Cain Velasquez may be fighting Fabricio for Doom in December. That's what we're hearing. But just out of curiosity, DC, at some point, would it be nice to add that other title? You know, everyone talks about Conor having 2 titles. What about DC having 2 titles?
You know, that's not a realistic thing for me. You know, I'm just happy with fighting at light heavyweight now. And I know that when you win 2 championships, man, you got to defend those championships. You don't just go, I won 2 championships now. I'm not going to really do anything with it, you know. So going out there and competing to be a champion in 2 weight classes will be great, but what happens when you have to defend that thing? And then your other division's kind of waiting, you know. It's like a tricky situation, you know. So I was just saying that if there is any logic left, if there was a guy going up, it would have to be me. Why wouldn't it be? I'm the one that's been here competing the whole time. So, but that's not really something that I would want to do.
Yeah. How realistic is it? You talk about winning the titles, then defending the titles, because we see Conor McGregor right now. It looks like, everything I'm hearing, I'm sure you're probably hearing the same thing, is that, Conor and Alvarez is the rumored fight for UFC 205 in New York. Everyone talks about him winning 2 titles. Obviously, he still hasn't defended the featherweight title. I mean, therein lies the problem with what you're talking about. He's going for a second title. He still hasn't defended the first one.
That's the issue. And don't think for a second Conor does not want to defend the championship. He does. He wants to defend the title. The guy that has the interim belt, he knocks out in 13 seconds. So he's confident in defending that belt. But where's the time when he was doing the stuff, when he had the Diaz thing going on? 2 of the biggest fights in UFC history. Now UFC 205, another one of the biggest fights the UFC has ever done. It's like, where's the time? It's like then you got both belts and you'd have the same situation in 2 weight classes, which is difficult. I don't want that stress either. Like, I don't need anything more on my mind, So, Conor McGregor seems to have the life, but could you imagine the tug of war that's being played for that kid's time all the time?
Yeah.
It's like probably, his mind's probably like completely clouded with people tugging at him.
Yeah. Well, you're a busy guy too, and that's what I'm saying. You got a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't know you owned the barbershops. That was news.
Yeah, I got 2 barbershops, man, down in Reseda. They're doing great. Obviously I have my kids' wrestling team. And then my TV career is very busy. So, yeah. I got it going right now.
So let me ask you, as you said, right now you don't have any clue as far as what's going on. Obviously, there's been a lot of speculation about John coming back, how that's going to play out. Listen, I got to be honest, DC, everyone's jumping the gun on the John Jones thing because, USADA may give him 6 months, but that doesn't mean Nevada's going to not give him a year or 2 years or whatever they decide to do. So I'm slowing down. So, at what point do you start calling Dana or you start calling the bosses and say, hey, what is going on? Like, are you just going to kind of let it play out or when do you start asking questions?
I just kind of let things play out, man. Because right now is the time for me to actually get better. Like, in training camp, you get sharp. You sharpen all your tools. But in between fights is when you get better. In between fights is when I can work on things where I can improve my game, So I'm just sitting here getting better, man. When it's time, it's time, But you're right, the whole thing with Johnny, it's kind of scary, because you don't know how long he's going to be gone. Nevada at one point tried to suspend Nate Diaz for 5 years or something like that.
Yeah.
It's crazy. You never know what's going to happen, You never know what's going to happen. And I think Anderson only got a year. Diaz ended up getting 18 months or 18 months. So you never know what precedent, what the precedent is for these types of suspensions. I guess they're saying that John had taken some sort of a pill, and if that comes back as true, in best case scenario, Anderson got a year for that same type of defense, I think. So that would put him all the way to next July. So, that's a long time.
Yeah. And I know you told, I think it was Brian Stanier on his show the other day, you said, at this point, November's come and gone. You're not fighting in New York. That's just too soon because I think a lot of people are kind of that mindset that card is coming up quick. So that's too soon. So if you were going to fight, it would have to be probably, I would guess, the end of the year, right? Like that December 30th card or something?
Yeah. I'd like to fight December 30th if that's possible. Fight at the beginning of the new year. It'll be my second time fighting one of those end of the year shows. Those are always fun. Your holidays kind of push back a couple weeks, but it's okay. I can deal with it. And they always stack that card, shooting a really, really big card.
Yeah, and be honest, as a dad, you feel a little guilty for being busy around the holidays. That just means the kids get more presents. That's all it really means, right?
They have better Christmases whenever you have stuff to do right after. You're like, all right, my time's not as there, but I want to make up for it. And right afterwards, man, it's great for them too. Like, we'll go on vacation, we'll do something really nice as a family. And it's always good. It's cold here. It still gets cold out in California in December, January. So maybe we'll go out to Hawaii or something where it's real nice whenever if I was to fight at the end of the year.
Yeah, I like it. Well, like I said, man, I hope it's you and AJ, you and Rumble. I think that's the fight to make. And I have nothing. I mean, like I said, I don't have anything personally against John Jones. I think John Jones is phenomenal, but we just don't know. And I don't think it's right to play around with the unknowns. You know what I mean? I think there's just too much. I actually think one of my opinions is I think saying that, John didn't do what he did and it's going to be a slap on the wrist. I think that's going to, my opinion, I think that might piss off Nevada because it's like people are just kind of overlooking their judgment. That's my opinion. I feel like it's a bad move to just assume nothing's going to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get you, Damon, for sure.
Well, DC, it's always a pleasure, buddy. I appreciate the time, man. Keep doing good work on UFC tonight, and obviously, man, I look forward to talking to you soon.
All right, brother. Talk to you later.
All right, talk to you soon. I'm kind of wondering what they are going to do with Daniel Cormier. Now that he is, now that he's ready to fight, he won't be ready in November. Obviously, I'm sure you saw the announcement today, and if not, I'll do so right now. Daniel Cormier is moving into the broadcast booth. He's going to be calling fights alongside John Anik up in Portland, the John Dodson, John Lineker fight card, which is coming up next weekend. Speaking of which, John Dodson will be stopping by our podcast next week, so make sure you tune into that. But Daniel Cormier is going to call some fights, and Dominic Cruz is actually going to call some fights this weekend. UFC Fight Night in Brasilia, Brazil. He's actually going to be calling the fights down there. Obviously, we have a great combination with John Anik and Brian Stan, but I think everyone knows that Brian's a very busy guy, and obviously between calling fights on Fox, the analyst work he does, and obviously Higher Heroes and some other projects he has going on, he's a busy guy. So I'm quite sure now that Joe Rogan has kind of lessened his schedule a little bit, and he's only doing the pay-per-views, Brian, I'm sure, is going to pick up the Fox gigs, and he's probably going to pick up a lot of the cards here locally in the United States, but sometimes guys have other things going on. So that's why you bring in commentary guys like Dominic Cruz and Daniel Cormier, who can do a great job working alongside John Anik calling these cards. So Daniel Cormier is not going to be fighting in November. He talked about fighting in December. There's rumor out there that Alexander Gustafsson is going to fight Antonio Rogerio Nogueira, which is good for him. I mean, I'm not going to fault the guy. That's the card coming up in November. I think it's November 19th in Brazil. And good for him. I just think what I thought should happen, or what I thought was better suited, would be December 30th or early next year cards. Once we get things cleared up with John Jones, assuming he's back in 6 months, and that's a big assuming, then you do Alexander Gustafsson and John Jones. You do Cormier and Johnson. I thought that was pretty simple. But again, we're putting a lot of eggs in a basket that we don't know is even going to be there, considering John Jones still hasn't had his day in front of the Nevada State Athletic Commission. I mentioned in the interview with DC, I think everyone's jumping a little bit too early about this whole John Jones is coming back and not getting punished kind of thing. I think those are the kind of things that piss off the commission and end with a year-long suspension. And at that point, obviously, it's definitely going to be Daniel Cormier and Anthony Johnson. I think that's the fight it should be anyways. Listen, I made no bones about it. John Jones is the greatest fighter of all time. He's not the greatest fighter of right now. He's not the greatest fighter of yesterday. He's not the greatest fighter in the UFC, in the light heavyweight division. He is the greatest fighter of all time, in my opinion. That being said, he messed up. He messed up a huge title fight in July, a historic card, UFC 200. To me, you cannot allow him to come back to a title fight. He's going to have to earn it again. Yes, I know. He just had the fight with Ovince St. Preux and obviously dominated him. But at the same time, to me, you can't have John Jones coming back and fighting for the title right away in that situation. Unless, if Daniel fights Anthony Johnson and wins, or however it plays out, then maybe John Jones comes in and gets a title shot after that. But my point is John Jones shouldn't get the next title shot. I guess that's really what I'm saying. He shouldn't get the next title shot. Whether it's Anthony Johnson or however it plays out, I just don't think you can put him back in there right now. Maybe he gets the next one in a year, maybe he gets the next one in 9 months, but I just don't see how you can have him come back, if he comes back, let's say, in a few months' time, and put him right in the title. I just don't see it, I don't like it, and I hope it doesn't happen. All right. With that said, we're going to get out of here today. I want to say a big thank you to all of our guests. Cris Cyborg, of course, she fights this Saturday night. UFC Fight Night in Brasilia, Brazil. Also a big thank you to the legend, Dan Henderson. He takes on Michael Bisping coming up in just a couple of weeks, the main event for UFC 204 from Manchester, England. And of course, a big thank you to the champ, DC, Daniel Cormier. Always good talking to DC. Appreciate him taking time. Make sure you check us out on SoundCloud and on iTunes. And we will see you guys in 1 week's time for more Fight Society podcast.